Oh hey, welcome to another edition of Socrates Explains Everything. My name is Socrates and I like to explain things. Today we're going to talk a little bit about how logistics and supply chains can matter more in warfare than winning battles. You may have noticed that there's this little thing called the Russian invasion of Ukraine at the moment. It involves a lot of infrastructure. It involves a lot of logistics, That's a significant train bridge behind me. It's 4 tracks crossing over a large piece of water. Right now, lots and lots of trains go over the top of that thing, and lots of boats go through the water. And yet, a couple of carefully placed demolition charges, you can drop that span into the water, and suddenly nothing's crossing this spot. And that goes back as long as warfare has ever crossed a river. At the moment, there's this 40-mile train of cars and vehicles and tanks from Russia going into Kyiv, and it's stalled on the road. It's 40 miles of vehicles. The thing with invasions especially is they're really expensive on resources. And if you're planning for a short one, it's apparently Putin thought this was going to be a cakewalk and the Ukrainians were going to welcome them with open arms. You may not really plan for enough stuff. And a 40-mile long convoy of tanks and armored vehicles, etc., is a lot of machines and a lot of men. Every day they consume literal tons of food, and again, tons of water, and again, tons of diesel fuel and other kinds of fuel and oils to lubricate these things. And these machines break real easy. They're weapons of war, but the things break down all the time. Don't have the spare parts, you have to leave that machine behind. If you don't have the fuel for it, you have to leave it behind. And once you're bottled up, now all you have is a resource drain. 40 miles of people needing food and water every day, and if you don't feed them and give them enough water, their morale and fighting capacity is destroyed. If you can block them off for a few months, they'll literally starve to death, if not surrender en masse. History is littered with examples of the successful side of a war losing battle after battle after battle. The Russians themselves lost endless battles against the Germans as they just endlessly retreated into their country. But every time you lose a battle, your supply lines get shorter. The enemy's supply lines get longer. And more than that, how many tanks did they start with? How many vehicles in that 40-mile column? Every day another one gets broken. Any enemy fire takes out more and more vehicles each and every day. It's an endless attrition. So you start with 1,000. Even without combat, you end up with 800, etc. Day by day, your forces are diminished and their fighting capacity is diminished. And eventually, you hit a point where you're stalled, which has happened quickly with this group. Usually they'll find, the will, etc., and the push from above to push forward, but now their forces are way diminished. After 10 days sitting there, you've lost all your supplies, you've eaten all your food and water, you've used up how much more fuel in the process of just trying to stay warm, etc., keeping the tank not to freeze, So now you push forward with diminished equipment, diminished morale, diminished supplies. You meet a stiffer resistance because it's been weeks they've had the chance to develop a defensive plan, and now your diminished force gets hit even harder, probably ends up stalling. Eventually if they try to retreat, they cut the back off too. It's classic. It's happened 1,000 times. The invading force penetrates, plunges into the other country. They meet resistance, stall out. Their lines are very long. Their lines are easy to cut. The supply lines, again, you drop a bridge and all of a sudden you're stranded over there, surrounded and cut off. And the modern military, this is the thing. Humans have been fighting each other since we grabbed a rock and hit another guy. And we evolved into, the weapons evolved for rocks and sticks and spears and eventually throwing things and arrows and guns. And now, we've got missiles and horrible fire bombs, these thermobaric bombs. But all that time, humanity's mostly the same. If anything, the guy with the rock was stronger than we are. So the weapons are almost infinitely more deadly. The targets are the same flesh and blood humans. So it's real easy to cut a group of people down with a modern piece of technology. drone strikes, you don't even risk yourself. So warfare is really deadly to whoever's receiving fire. And this war is going to show that just like other ones. And this isn't being fought by motivated people. The people that are fighting for the Russians, a lot of them are very young men who they did not even know they were going to war. They thought they were going for a training exercise, and suddenly people started shooting at them. And that'll open your eyes or terrify you something crazy when real bullets are flying and you don't expect it. If somebody shot at me right now, I would freak out. I think rightfully so. So just because you win the first few opening stanzas of a battle does not mean you're going to win the war, especially when morale comes into it. And infrastructure. They were already dropping bridges in Ukraine, and if you're not prepared to fix them, militaries carry, bridges, if that's your plan, if you've got it all worked out. But if you figure it's 10 days cakewalk, you may not bring that bridging equipment, etc. Especially on a level you're thinking that shows that you expect stiff resistance. They're going to drop their bridges. They have modern weapons too. Those javelin missiles, all those things are just deadly as hell. So anyway, I think it's a crazy time of the world. We've got environmental crisis that's going to kill us all. So having a war is about as stupid as it could be. I don't think old people should be in charge of any country. I'm 56, and the idea that in 14 years when I'm 70, I'm in charge of a country, that is stupid. That is just stupid. Young people who have a future, I don't care about environmental damage. 30 years from now, before it kicks in, I'll squeak out. So we got to change these systems, because these systems are not doing well. But I like the trains, though. See you again soon. Support Ukraine. Boo Russia. Boo Putin. Boo. Boo.